Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Heather Levy. Heather
Hello.
is hello, Heather. Heather is a born and bred Oklahoman. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And graduate of Oklahoma City University's Red Earth MFA program for creative writing. The New York Times called her Anthony-nominated debut, Walking Through Needles, a spellbinding novel at the nexus of power, desire, and abuse that portends a bright future. And the LA Times called it a standout for its frank but sensitive exploration of trauma and desire. Publishers Weekly says her thriller, Hurt for Me, delivers both heat and heart. Her novels focus on sexuality and complex women. Levy lives in Oklahoma with her husband, 2 kids, and 3 murderous cats. Welcome, Heather.
Hey, so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And we were just talking before we got on, I wore my my pink Killer Women sweater to match
Love it.
Heather's incredible pink hair, which is so fabulous. I don't know how you get it to be so brilliant pink. You must go blonde first. How do you do this?
I'm actually a natural blonde, although now it's more like kind of gray / dirty blonde.
I know, right.
But yeah, during the pandemic, my husband became my root bleacher, and we've just been doing it ever since. Because I've always colored my own hair, but
I love it.
It's just hard it's hard bleaching hairs. He's really good at it.
Well, that was we totally got immediately off kilter because your hair is so fabulous. I was like, we have to start. And so those of you that are listening on your favorite podcast channel, you have to go and find a picture of Heather because she has fabulous fuchsia. Is that what you'd call it? Fuchsia hair.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So we are here to talk about This Violent Heart. And I love that there's so much pink in the cover too, which is such a fabulous cover. I love it when there's a good cover. And actually, you know what? I think Amazon does amazing covers. I think they're so good at covers.
They really do. I've been I love the covers that they've done for my book. So
me too. Yeah. I had six books with them and all the covers have been fabulous. So, okay. Before we get too much more sidetracked about pink and its fabulousness, tell our listeners about This Violent Heart.
Yeah, so This Violent Heart follows Devin Mays, who is a young therapist who reluctantly returns to her rural Oklahoma hometown, where she discovers some unsettling truths surrounding her teenage best friend's death, which may not have been by suicide, as everyone in town believed. And so she reconnects with her best friend's twin brother, Keaton, and they start looking into the best friend Summer's death. And the more they dig, the more they realize, okay, yeah, so somebody's trying to hide something. And then, of course, she's dealing with her bisexuality and being back in a very conservative town where, she has a lot of trauma from. So
yes, yeah. And her parents in particular, right? Very religious, very, in fact, she was not been out to her parents before the novel starts. And she's a woman, obviously. So, yeah. So obviously from all the accolades, from all the publisher, from LA Times, New York Times, you like to focus on, you feel your focus is on women's trauma, strong women, queer women. Tell us, I know that's born of your own experiences, but tell us a little bit about how that started for you. I mean, getting into this kind of writing.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in how women in particular can take trauma, in particular sexual trauma, many times, and reshape that and become empowered with through their sexuality. And then with this book, my character, she does experience some sexual trauma. It's off page, but she's dealing with that throughout the book. Um, and of course, still dealing with the shame that she's always felt with being bisexual. That's something that is very, personal to me. This is kind of
Yeah.
like my well, it's not the coming out book because I was out, prior to this book, but only recently have I been publicly out, and I felt like it was important, uh, for me to be able to share that, especially in the environment that we're in.
Mm.
I want to make sure that my kids, and one of my kids is out as bisexual. I wanted them to know that it's okay, and you know, you can have a full life. You can, you know, basically just. I'm sorry. I'm like totally, I get so emotional whenever I think about it
No,
because
it's
um
yeah,
I want to try not to. So growing up, I've had to hide a lot of myself. And so Devin having that experience, I really couldn't separate us many times throughout the writing of the book. Um, but it was important that I have that and that I show that. And I'm hearing from people who have read advanced copies and they're connecting with her character and are like, thank you,
right.
because I think the experience of people who uh, kind of grow up in this protective bubble where, they're not having to worry about their safety. It's different. It is different
Yeah,
growing up in a space where you really do have to look over your shoulder. You have to be
absolutely.
very mindful about what you post because of what people are going to see. And this was
Hmm.
like my coming out. I was just saying, can I cuss on here?
Yeah,
Are
fuck
we
yeah.
allowed to cuss? Okay,
Yes.
yeah, fuck it. Fuck it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, fuck it. And that was the journey for Devin, in part with this book is
Yeah.
that, trying to find that place where she can love herself.
Yeah.
Because that, if you don't have that, how are you going to love anybody else?
No, and
As
I
RuPaul says.
yeah, and I think we're better. Like nowadays, we're better at. I think the universe is better at understanding that sexuality, gender, it's all such a continuum. There's no and but I think still, for the person who's experiencing that, it feels very isolating in the same way that it feels isolating. People of color, and because there's just so much. You know, for whatever reason, there's so much shame in all of these sort of labels that aren't basically like white Christian male. Like, I don't know why
Yeah.
that they're the ones. And now, of course, they're feeling the heat too. But it's just like, I
Yeah.
think it's so important to put, and this is why I think we read fiction. We read fiction. I read fiction so that I can be, a black slave or a bisexual woman or a, white man or whatever, just to have experiences of other people's lives because we don't have that. We don't have that in our real lives. And we have it because of people like you who are putting out your truth. And we're reading that so that we can be better, more compassionate humans. And so that we,
Yeah.
like you said, support, our siblings, our children, our, partners, whatever in the world, our friends.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that I accomplished that. Uh, I all I could do is just put the truth out there, put Devin's truth, and hope that it connected with readers. So far, it feels like it is. So
Well, and you
yeah,
and it's. I mean, this is the writer's dilemma, right? There's going to be wonderful people who
Mhm.
relate to the book and embrace it and the story and Devin, and therefore you feel embraced because the characters embrace. And there's going to be people who don't, and we just have to sort of
Right.
like find the way to like shut out that because that's the way it is. I mean, and the internet and it's like it's the cover it gives people to be disgusting humans. I mean, I think it's just part of the nature of art, but it isn't easy, right? It feels
Right.
awful.
Yeah, and I really, I mean, after Hurt for Me, my last book, which dealt with a single mom dominatrix,
Oh,
and
I
so
love I know there's some fun
uh,
stuff in this book too.
yeah, and it was definitely because I do have I'm a kink positive writer as well, so yes, I've got the female empowerment through sexuality and there's some kink. I'm a
Yeah,
part of that community, but yeah, I had so many, there were a lot of reviews like woke, all of that,
yeah,
and I'm like, it's amazing to me that you know you're being out with your sexuality, writing about characters and their queer, identity. It's like, how is that woke? You're just that's who you are. That's
right, right.
you can't change it. So, but I get it. People have their opinions. I really try not to look at reviews. My
Mm-mm.
husband used to read me like my just the good reviews. I'm like, I don't want
Yes,
to see.
right, right. Yeah,
If I
just
needed
click
a little boost.
click me the 5-star reviews, and then the rest of them, they can,
Yeah.
I remember, and I mean, for me, it's like it's just those first ones, and like I remember when Whiteout came out, it was like the very first review of Whiteout was like a 1-star review, and I was like, what the fuck, like, and it was like some, and you still remember it. It's like a woman she's like, there's plot holes I could drive a truck through, and I'm like, okay, well, it just, and it's, you get over it, but obviously not that over it. Look at me. It's like however many years later, and I'm still like, I can still remember that one review. So it's a hard thing. I think, you know, people could be kinder about, to artists in general. You
Yeah.
don't have to love a book.
Yeah.
I think, but if you're going to hate a book, I'd rather you hate it for its incompetence rather than for its content, right?
Exactly.
So I guess,
Exactly.
yeah, in that way. So tell us, and you're probably already working on your new book, like as the stuff,
Yes.
right? As the world works for us. So when you're coming up with ideas, is it I mean, it seems to me the stories are, very character driven. Is it a character who speaks to you? Is it a situation? What happens? Because this is all triggered by
Yeah.
the death of a patient in the beginning of Devon's story. And sort of that is, but the fact that she's a therapist, there's so many layers of it. So tell us sort of how does a story come to you?
Yeah. So yes, character always comes to me first. So I hear the character's voice. Devin actually shows up in a prior book. So she's kind of
Interesting.
like a
Yeah.
so those who are familiar, they'll be like, oh. But so I already had in this case Devin's voice. In my day work, I deal with disability.
Uh-huh.
So I deal with people who are dealing with disabilities. I work with a lot of psychologists. One of my friends is a psychologist. So we have a lot of those discussions, and I have to be trained on how to recognize symptoms, and so so I kind of like, if in another life I would have been a therapist, and
Yeah.
most likely a sex therapist, because
Yeah.
I think we have literally two sex therapists in all of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Um, so we really need that.
Montana's probably similar. I would imagine it's probably similar here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my and then of course everything just over, the last few years, in particular, we're seeing more and more uh queer issues come up, where it feels like it's just a continuous battle.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of that in this state, and those safe spaces seem to get smaller. And I live in Oklahoma City. I live in a little kind of blue pocket. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, I the more I felt that suppression, the more I was like, I just need I have to have a story, and I feel like
Yeah.
I've got to have, I mean, that confusion that I felt, as a teenager, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I've got to process that because I never really processed it. And I don't know if you're like this as well. I know a lot of fellow writers are like this, but you're kind of dealing with your shit through your writing. It's that's the therapeutic process,
Yeah.
right? And so I do a lot of that with my writing, and this book more so than probably anything that I've written.
Yeah.
Um, uh, just trying to find that acceptance within yourself and
Yeah.
and just live your truest self.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I love twins. I don't know. I've had this like weird fascination with twins.
Well, I
So
do
my
love that they're twins and that one's a boy and one's a girl because I think that's a
right.
really interesting dynamic. I mean, I
Yes,
think
yeah.
right, yeah, that you see yourself in in the shape of somebody from the opposite gender, and they see. I mean, because these are, they're really close too, and they
Yeah.
support each other, which is you can't. I mean, the loss of a twin, right? That's probably one of the worst things.
The worst kind of loss. And so I was like, okay, uh this is how I'm gonna shape this story.
Yeah,
Um and then I don't know, dual timelines. I actually the book that I'm writing right now is the first time that I'm writing a linear
you're like,
story. And
yay, yay.
it's so hard. It's not natural for me to write in
Interesting.
a linear form. So I'm like, okay.
So when
But
you
yeah.
do you are you a like how do you organize your a book before you start? Obviously it sounds like you knew there were going to be dual timelines like in this book. Do you are you an outliner?
Eh, I I want to be a plotter so
Yeah,
badly.
yeah,
I am a pantser. Although with this book, I kind of have like my certain plot points, so I already
yes,
know. Okay, at this point, and then I just hope they all kind of
yeah.
come together.
Right. You're like,
But I
oh,
am
making
not.
this fit. Yeah,
Like I've known people who they'll write like one timeline all the way through, and then they'll write the other timeline all the way through,
oh
and
yeah,
just kind of shuffle the deck. And
yeah.
I don't know how they do that. For me, it's just I have to kind of feel it as I'm writing in the transition into the next chapter. Um, and
And I think that
that's just
helps
how it
because
works.
they propel each other, right? In my mind,
Right.
they have to be so well woven that you end the scene in the present and it drives you into the past, which drives you to the present, which drives you back to the past.
Yeah.
And I am the same. I mean, I even the book that's going to come out next year for me, Pinky Swear, is actually just got like 8 chapters in the past. And I pulled those out and read them all as one to make sure they're fluid, but I had to write them as I was writing. Wouldn't have worked. I can't imagine having written that all the way through and then been like, where are these going to go? I just, yeah, no,
I
no.
But yes, linear writing is just it's so I don't know why it's so hard for me.
It's,
I was like, I'm gonna try to like maybe I'll just have some like, flashback scenes. And I tried to do that with this Violent Heart too. I was like, can I get away with not having and I'm like, there's no way. Like I
mm-mm.
have to have that voice, and I had to have Summer.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like I just wanted her. I wanted her to have her own voice within the
Well,
story. So
I love the journal scenes. I think that's a really lovely way because also the voice of a teenage girl is so distinct. And I mean, I think I don't know any teenage girl who didn't have all those like emotions of like, I mean, she had her own stuff going on, no question, but the anxiety, the who am I, the what do I do, who can I tell, who can I trust, and burning bridges that you didn't need to burn, but you thought you were doing the right thing. It's really it's such a lonely time, and you've got teenagers at home, so you're like up close and personal with it right now.
yes, I've got an almost 19-year-old. So as I was writing this, I was like, oh gosh, like my daughter's like the same age as this character, and yeah, so I felt it. And then
Yeah,
tapping into my own inner teen,
yeah,
like yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I do love that because I also think, like you said, if we don't tap into that history of ourselves, that is where we sort of, that's where all that like IFS training, therapy is the inner family systems where there's like little girls in you who never got loved the right way, and so you're like you're coaxing them and loving. It's funny, like all of that, which has got so prevalent, which makes so much sense. Because for all these years, we were like, the past is the past. And it's like, no, not really. It
It's really
bleeds
not.
all over the future and the present, and you really have to take care of it. You got to cauterize that shit before you move on. So
Yes, yes. So this book is me cauterizing.
I love that. It's actually kind of a weirdly
That
appropriate
wound
analogy
is, I
too.
mean, well, it's almost healed. It's
I
almost.
know. It's so it'll break open a little and bleed a little more, I'm sure, but that as the past does. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now? I mean,
Ooh,
feel free
okay.
to say no. I understand.
Um, Okay, I'll just say it involves it's the first time that I am not writing kind of a romantic subplot, which is this book is just so uncomfortable for me in general. But it was an idea like I was actually working on a burlesque book, and I still have that in the back burner. But I'm sure you've had this where an idea just hits you, and you're like, damn it.
I have to write that. Yeah.
You have to write this first. Like this is telling me you've got to write this first. So it's involving two sisters who are estranged. Have just come from their mother's funeral in another state, and they decide they're going to drive back home across states, and kind of talk. Well, one sister wants to talk and kind of say, "Hey, we need to reconnect." The other sister, older sister, is like, "No," and that's because she's always hidden something from her younger sister, and if her younger sister knew about it, her like world would collapse.
I love it.
All of this while there's a serial killer that is kind of making his runs, and he's meets up with these sisters, and his kind of MO is to kind of fuck with people, playing like a therapist. And so through their interactions with this person, these sisters are really forced to face a lot of trauma that they experienced, some of
I
which
love it.
one did not know about,
Yeah.
and try to not die.
Yeah.
So
And above all, right. Not get serial killed. That sounds really like, well, that's a great
yeah,
premise. And I love the idea because siblings are also like, it's like childhood friends, siblings. These are all these really intimate, vulnerable relationships that we have that are
yeah,
really great ways to explore all of the things. And I love that you're doing that because I do feel like, and I'm sure your readers, I know you obviously have doing so well in your career that I think readers are clearly responding to the idea that that you're out there telling your truth and that it's so important. And I think it's probably more important for men than I ever acknowledge. I don't think they do it maybe as naturally, or they pretend they don't need it when they probably do.
yeah.
um but I think, as especially as a woman now in her 50s, I feel like it's just like the best part of life is being real with other women. It's like my favorite thing,
Yes,
and
I love
thus
that as
the
well.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
so exciting. Well, I want to take one more minute and look at this gorgeous cover. And this book is out on February 11th, which is today. It's not when we're recording it, but when you are watching this book is out in the world right now, this minute. So go get This Violent Heart and check out Heather because she has a really beautiful backlist too. And I think all of your covers, I don't know why I'm just obsessed with covers. I think they're such a fun way to look inside a book. So go check this out too. Heather, tell our listeners where to find you. I know I see you on Instagram, and nobody's on TikTok anymore, I guess, right now, or maybe by the time you listen to this, we'll be back on TikTok. I don't know. But where do people find you?
Instagram at Heather L. Levy. You can also find me on Blue Sky. I think I'm Heather Levy, just Heather Levy on Blue Sky. And of course, my website, heatherlevywriter.com. So yeah, go out there. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Oh my God, so fun, Heather. It was great to chat today. Everyone, this was Killer Women with Heather Levy, and we will see you next time. Bye.